All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Can everybody hear me okay? We're going to try to do it tonight without a microphone, okay? We tried it, it had a little echo. So at any point, if I change or if you can't hear Bonnie, just please raise your hand, okay? And we'll talk a little louder. So I want to welcome all of you and thank you very much for joining us. My name is Marcus Pochner. You're going to hear from Bonnie Nizelik and Todd Johnson here in just a moment, part of our team. We are part of the Uplands team. This is actually our Uplands mascot right here. This little puppy. No, I don't know what this is. There we go. So folks, I just want to say it has been a long time. We have all been working on this project. I actually recognize so many of you in this room. And I think we had our first large community meeting in this space. So I want to thank you for your continued involvement, for representing your community and going through this process. So I'm Marcus Pochner. I'm a consultant that generally works on land use and community outreach. I've been involved since the very inception of this project, and we're going to talk a lot tonight. What I want to tell you a little bit about, we have about 30 slides to go through. I want to be very clear up front. We will stay and have plenty of time for Q&A, okay? So please know, hold your questions to the end. We'll be happy to go through Q&A and answer any questions that you have about this site. I want to be very clear that we're here to talk about public improvements that are planned. So the public improvements, we're actually going to detail. We have a number of images that go all around the Uplands parcels. And I want to say respectfully, all by your respective neighborhoods, right? So I know you are neighbors. I know you know this site incredibly well. You live adjacent to the site. You may be in Shaw Heights. You may be in Observatory Heights. You may be in any of the adjoining neighborhoods. But we want to respect and understand that and try to show graphics and maps of what we're making. Most importantly, this is a meeting that we wanted to hold to tell you about the infrastructure improvements. We said when we started this project that we were going to be making significant infrastructure improvements before we started building homes on this site. And this is what we're here to show you. We are ready to commence that process of making these infrastructure improvements, and we'll walk through them. So this is not a required meeting. We did follow the city notice requirements because we thought it was absolutely appropriate to follow that model, but we wanted to share it. So again, plenty of time for Q&A, and we're going to go ahead and jump in. Everybody still hearing me okay? We're all right. Good. Next slide, please. This is our team. I introduced myself. I'm Marcus. This is Bonnie. Todd Johnson is right there, ready to talk about the infrastructure. And then Chad Ellington from Peak Development is here as well. We have other team members as well. If we can't answer one of the questions, or we'll get back to you. I do want to be sure and say we are recording this meeting. We're recording this, and we will tie it to the images that we're showing, the slides, and you'll be able to view this later. So it's not a live recording of the audio or of the video, but we'll tie it to the slideshow so everybody can watch this later or share it with your neighbors. Next slide. Just an overview, a quick snapshot of where we're headed tonight. You already met our team. I think you've met many of us. This team has all been involved since the beginning. We're going to talk about the vicinity map, the map of your neighborhoods, right? This infill site, the farm, going through that and talking about it. The public notice, really scoping who was notified to be here, your participation, and then most importantly, really detail these infrastructure improvements. Here is the public notice. So these show the different parcels of Uplands. I think you've all seen this map in many different forms. I've seen this orange one forever and ever, but these are the blocks. This is parcel A, this is parcel B here, so we'll talk a lot about parcel B. Down here, parcel C, D, and E. So those are the parcels, but what we decided to do, what we thought was the right thing to do, was actually follow 1,000 feet of notice around the perimeter of the entire site. So we noticed just under 1,900 residents, 1,895, and we sent written notice of this meeting, again, so we could have full participation from all of the surrounding and adjacent neighborhoods. Next slide. This is an Uplands update. I want you to think of this as basically a dashboard. You're going to start seeing this on our website. This is a way of just tracking what we're doing and the process that we are in right now. So this is the infrastructure kind of snapshot, the infrastructure to show what we're going to do here on the site. And most importantly is to really look at these three, this legend up here, and we're going to walk through each one of these. But the red color are sanitary sewer improvements, sanitary sewer drainage improvements. You can see right there into Shaw Heights where we are making those improvements. We're going to talk about that. The blue are water improvements and upgrades. Water lines, water infrastructure, that goes throughout most of Parcel A. Certainly, of course, comes into Parcel B as well. But we are starting with water improvements on the A site as well. So all of those lines that you see there that basically follow our future streets, we are going to make those water improvements and upgrades. Finally, storm drainage improvements. All of you that live here near Shaw Boulevard or Circle understand existing flooding conditions, existing problems that have been there for a long time. We are making substantial improvements to that now before we build a home to make sure that those improvements are there. So we're going to talk a little bit about those storm drainage improvements as well. Last thing before I go from there, right outside of here, we're all here in the school tonight, and thanks to them very much for hosting us. There will be a new stoplight that will be built at 86th and Federal. I think one of the most important things we can do for the safety, Bonnie mentioned it, there were two gentlemen that were trying to bike on the other side of Federal when I turned in here. I could not believe that. We are bringing safety and a full street grid and sidewalk grid to that side of Federal, and we'll have safe passage, of course, being able to cross Federal here as well. Next slide. So adding to this dashboard, right, we all kind of think of what is happening. We just added on two additional things here. This kind of darker orange color, it says Neighborhoods and City Review, okay? So I just want to step back on that darker orange. You can see A2, A4, C1A, I'm sorry, Jasper, B1, C1A, C1D, and C2. All of those neighborhoods, those are sub-neighborhoods, those are all in city review right now. So we or our development partners have made application to the city and are going through the approval process right now for those neighborhoods, okay? So again, the dark orange, the dark kind of cyan color are neighborhoods in city review. The difference, the lighter orange says neighborhoods beginning the city process. That city process can take 6 months to a year, but that other, so A1, A5, and A7 are commencing their city process, okay? And what we are doing on those are specific site plans, okay? So we are going through the site plans, the layout, the architecture, the homes, the neighborhoods, all of those things that will happen. So we're gonna go into a little more detail, but this is really the most updated picture. I don't think anybody has seen this image yet of everything that is in process in Uplands. Uplands has commenced. It is commencing now, and we are moving forward first on the infrastructure before these neighborhoods are built and delivered. Next slide. All right, this is the PDP, Preliminary Development Plan Commitments. I don't know, commitments may have two T's. No, is that correct? That's good, okay, I was wrong, all right, good. So this is the commitments that we have already made, and we want to be sure that you know this is the documents that were approved by City Council that said these must be built. So we're going to go back to the commitments that we made that we need to deliver on this site. This, and I'm not going to read all of this, but you can kind of see it. I think everybody hearing me okay? So just again, what we said in the preliminary development plan, these are the public improvements that have to be made. So just so everybody, and we'll happily have this where people can come look at it afterwards, this is really the Upland site that we were talking about, right? But there are off-site improvements that we committed to as well. So we are making significant off-site improvements because it was the right thing to do to provide better infrastructure, better service to us and to you as neighbors. There are significant improvements that are going to happen to the neighbors. I do want to show this little box right here that kind of shows the dashes there. It says improvements by city. That shows what is a city project, but what we are tying into. There's another one here that says lift station upgrades. The city is making those, but the others are the connections that we're making. Generally, here's the summary of what the commitments are and that we are fulfilling every one of them. $40 million in infrastructure improvements, sewer, water, storm drainage, roads, etc. Okay? That's the commitment of what we are doing. We are fixing downstream deficiencies. These are the exact commitments that are required in our PDP, and we are honoring each and every one of them. The upsize, we also upsize, strengthen, and supplement the water lines and fire needs. That also goes to your surrounding homes. And then we also significantly reduce the downstream stormwater detention, the issues that you have with existing flooding issues. Let's talk about some of these. Next slide. These are two particular, I know because I recognize so many of you have been involved in Shaw Heights here. There are two, and probably most important, the downstream storm drainage improvements that we are going to commence here in the next couple of months on both Shaw Boulevard and Circle Drive to try to prevent that flooding that has existed for many, many years. Next slide. Bonnie Nigelli is our principal lead planner. She's going to walk us through the bike and pedestrian connectivity. This is a little harder to read. We understand that, and I apologize for that. But she's really going to focus on what we're providing, primarily Bonnie, and really parcel A and B here. Can you walk us through this map and kind of what we're providing?
Yeah, absolutely. Good to see you all again. So this map outlines a lot of the mobility pieces of Uplands. So these orange and yellow lines are really focused on bike connections and sidewalk connections. So Marcus, we were talking about the gentleman trying to bike down the non-sidewalk on Federal today, or if you've ever tried to get to the bus stop at Federal and 86, it's challenging. There's no place to walk. So part of this first phase of improvements is providing all these bike and sidewalk connections so that you can all get to all the places in your neighborhood that you can't get to today by foot or by bike. Next slide. Another key piece of this is the public land dedication. So this is in two different parts. So first, the dark green is two public land dedications that will be developed as parks. That's a total of 34 acres. And so we are currently wrapping up the planning process, which dedicates those 34 acres to the city later this fall. On top of that, we have the 6.35 acres of youth corridors. So that's that lighter green color. Those are also being platted this fall and will be dedicated to the city. So the city will own all these light green and dark green parcels as soon as that dedication is wrapped up.
So one thing I just want to add on this is the 34.3 total acres of PLD, public land dedication, granted to the city, and then 6.35 acres of new corridor. That goes through a separate planning process, a city-led process. I do want to be sure and point out within the individual neighborhoods, there are, of course, additional open space. There are parks, there are pocket parks, but this is public land dedication. So land that is dedicated to the city working through that process. Great, next slide. All right, Todd gets to walk through phase one improvements. So folks, again, the reason we're here, and Todd is our lead engineer on this project and has been from the beginning, we're here to talk about what you're going to see over the next number of months. We're talking about those improvements that we're planning commencing this fall of 2023. We're going to go through it again. I think we've got maybe 12 slides left, and then we'll be happy to go back and go through any questions that you have for Todd. Next slide.
Good evening, everyone. Todd Johnson, Terraforma Solutions, heading up the technical staff here. And what we are in the process of right now is we have multiple plan sets into the city. So we have a set of plans that is being reviewed by not only the city, but also CDOT for federal. We have a set of plans that is going to look at and design, and then of course us build the infrastructure down Shaw. So those improvements, and also the improvements on our site for the pond to assist with the drainage side of it. And then we have all of the exterior roadways outside of that parcel A. So we have 88th, we have Lowell, 84th, and then interior roadways as well. And what we're shooting for right now is actually to get our initial package and approval for the grading on the site. And that includes erosion control measures first that are put in place to help control any sediment from going off site. It puts measures that are in place that are regulated by not only the city, but also the state for how we control the site and how we control construction that goes on in the site. And we're looking at two phases of this construction. And what we looked at and worked through with the city is let's not disturb the entire site. Let's not, totally destroy everything and really create a problem with our earthwork operations and dust and those types of things. let's keep this to a manageable situation for our contractors, and also, as much as possible, cutting down on any nuisance to the neighbors. And so we have 2 phases. We'll be starting on the western side of the project. Irving is actually splitting the project really in half, and it's basically about half of the site that we have. And so we'll be starting that earthwork. And actually, if I back up for 1 second, the first thing that we'll be doing is taking down any of the structures out there, doing any of our demolition that's on the site. That's going to occur here sometime in August, and then we anticipate grading starting in September. And then roadway construction, we're getting those plans approved, as I mentioned. That construction will probably start shortly after the grading operation starts. And we'll be grading on site, and so we'll be grading in this orange area that you're seeing here, but we'll also be starting roadway construction as soon as those plans are ready and as soon as we bid this work, secured that contract, and got them lined up to start, and that they've pulled all the permits with the city as well. And that phasing of the roadway work, what we're trying to do is actually get the impacts to the neighbors done as quickly as possible. Okay, so we're looking at starting on Lowell and doing those improvements, because those improvements are pretty limited in scale compared to Federal and compared to 84th. So we'll be starting on Lowell, we'll be starting on 88th. Again, very limited improvements there. The north side is really not going to be touched. We're really doing improvements and widening to the south. And on Lowell, we're really pushing into our site to do those improvements. So that is the initial work that you'll start to see in the construction that we've got phased for the project. The second phase, okay, I'll go through a couple of roadway cross sections here. So what you're seeing here is Lowell, and then what we're improving is you have the parking on the resident side right now. We're adding bike lanes on both sides of the roadway, and we're adding parking to our side along with sidewalks. So this is Lowell. This is 88, very similar situation here, where the only difference is really we have a turn lane in the middle that's being formalized there, but we're adding parking, adding bike lanes, formalizing bike lanes that are out there, and adding a walk on our side. Federal, really this is looking at improvements on the our parcel or our side of Federal, but we will have improvements on the east side as well. But we're really formalizing a shoulder that's out there today into an auxiliary lane. We're adding also the walk on our side, and we'll be adding and formalizing the turn pockets and turn lanes that are coming into the site. Along with that, we're going to be upgrading or improving the signals at 84th, installing a new signal, as Marcus mentioned, at 86 right here, and doing the same thing at 88th, improving that intersection. Additionally, on Lowell, we're improving the signals at 88th and 84th. Phase 2 improvements, again, when we finish off the grading on the eastern side of the site, we'll be working on the storm drainage roadway improvements that you're seeing there, and also going on then to the second phase in grading the eastern side of the site. At that same time, we're probably going to be progressing from Lowell and 88th improvements, where those are wrapping up, and then we will go on to 84th and be working up and down Federal as well. And what we're really trying to do is we're trying to keep the disturbance down to one east-west, one north-south roadway at a time. So if we're working on Lowell, we don't really want to be doing work on Federal. We want to keep that in its state where we don't really have traffic problems any more burdensome than are out there today. And then when Lowell gets finished, moving over to Federal. Here you're seeing 84th, again, just 2 lanes, adding bike lanes again, adding parking and sidewalks to that section. Here's the schedule that I mentioned. So August of this year, we're starting with the structures. In September, we're getting into the grading, where we start with erosion control. That's the first thing you really see. You see fences going up along, silt fences up along the edges of the property. You see storm drainage protection out there. You'll see water trucks that are there to help keep the dust down on the site as a grading operation start. And then in the fall of 23 as well, probably after September, we'll be getting into the roadway construction starting. I can go through a little of this. So yeah, one more clarification. I want to say, can you go to the overall that we had? Go to the overall picture that we had. One clarification that we wanted to make from what Marcus was saying, where we show the city improvements. The city improvements we are actually funding. So there was a discussion here early about us not paying for these improvements. We are paying for these improvements. Okay, so everything that you're seeing in the core, these were requirements of us and the $40 million, but we are paying cash in lieu for those off-site improvements, and those improvements are being done by the city. There's also some off-site sanitary that's being put in place that you don't see on this map, and the other improvements, again, that you're seeing here that are highlighted, we are paying for. So we just want to make that clarification in the one of the comments that came up earlier. So
yeah, and thank you. And actually stay there, Jasper. I just want to clarify if anybody had any questions about that. The reason we put that box there, improvements by the city, that means that goes through their contracting. They have to go through that process. Those are off-site. We can't go make those improvements. That is the customary. When we're finished, we'll take questions. That is the customary process. We have to fund those. We are funding everyone, and that's exactly what the PDP said. So it's the same process, the same agreement that we've always had in place. We are paying for those improvements that'll be done. Karen, we just have 3 summary slides, and then we'll move to questions. Just a quick couple of things. I'm not going to redo these slides, but we just wanted to, again, start. I want to say before we transition to questions, if you want to see the cross-section on 84th or 88th Lowell Federal, just ask us, okay? I know it was hard to see those improvements. Generally, realize that the improvements are being made on our side, the Uplands parcel. So if you see an additional bike lane that is happening not on your side of the street, but internal to our site, right? Whatever that adjoining street is. The reason tonight that we wanted to make a specific and separate infrastructure addition, infrastructure improvement meeting was these are not related to any of the neighborhood submittals. So when a developer comes through and they're going to start on B1, when we do a home development there, they will have improvements inside that neighborhood. But these are improvements that are starting now that are not attached to a separate development application. These are infrastructure improvements that have been going through the approval process for the last number of years, completely consistent with the existing framework development plan. So I just want to be clear, that's why we're showing this. We're going through that process and going through that. Of course, internal to our neighborhoods, there will be additional streets, curbs, gutters, all of those. That comes in with the application of the neighborhood plan itself. Next slide, Jasper. This shows, again, we'll talk more about this offsite. I know there's Shaw Heights folks that maybe want to ask about this. Next slide, we looked at this, again, looking at the completed infrastructure, the kind of knitting of this back into the fabric of the city. Next slide. This is one you haven't seen. I just want to show, this is something we started our first presentation on. On your left, the images, that red are gaps in the sidewalk network. All of those edges do not have sidewalks today. There is no sidewalks, there is not safe passage. None of that city infrastructure exists today. What we are proposing and the process we are going through in these 2 phases, these are the sidewalk gaps that we are filling in these 2 phases. So just to show how we're knitting it back in, it's infill development, but this is the process really taking it from no network of pedestrian connectivity to a network of pedestrian connectivity. Next slide. Okay, folks, you've seen this one. We're just going to go and use this as a transition to the question and answer. I do want to thank you for being very patient and doing that. We have a full team here to answer questions, and we're happy to go through them. Mr. John.
Yeah, there was no mention of any improvements over there at Franklin Drive, and we were in the middle of something about the B parcel.
Sure.
That's going in front of the planning commission next week.
Yeah.
I think we should be hearing more about that. And again, improvements, right?
Sure. So I'll start and then I'm going to go talk. So Jasper, the question was about Bradburn Boulevard. So if you can maybe look at, I don't know, maybe Bonnie, you'll know the slides best, which one to look at. I just want to be clear about something John said. This parcel B1, we are going first to Planning Commission on. We already had a number of community meetings. We had the required community meeting on that project. You were in attendance at that meeting. We had that meeting. We go to Planning Commission next week. So we've gone through that process. We have a very detailed plan and we're happy to go. So if anybody has any questions about that neighborhood, again, in compliance, you are correct, John, and I appreciate your question. On that parcel B, it's a great example, B1, that application contains the infrastructure that is improvements along Bradburn and internal to that site. So just as it's a great example of when we go through the neighborhood application process, the site-specific development plan, all the improvements where we touch that or internal, we make that during the process. What is different about these are shared roadways that we think it's imperative that we make those infrastructure improvements, as did the city, as did neighbors, that we make these improvements before we start building and adding homes here. So that's the difference of those. Yes, please.
A couple of points.
Sure.
I would agree with some of the take that maybe these are improvements because on parcel B it's full of sunflowers and wildlife right now. So
What are you gonna cut though? Cut your field?
grading and improve it. That being said, I remember when you presented to the city council about approval, it seems like you skipped down on the public land dedication than what was voted on. It seems like you really kind of cut the corners and edges and shrunk that down. So that's just kind of a high level.
Yeah, no problem. I'll take your first question. So,
One more.
one more. Go for it. You bet.
First one, you don't need it. Second one, seems like you shrunk the public land dedication. Two, you've not talked about there's a cross street, it's kind of a diagonal street. When is that going to be closed?
Sure. Very good question. First one, and I appreciate your comment. Again, the comment, are these improvements or not? I'll respect any individual's opinion on their improvements or not. Their additions, their infrastructure additions, improvements, I would say from a pedestrian and a bicycle and from a safety and thinking of the tragedy that's happened right outside of here, I'd say very much they're an improvement. But I understand people can take their own path on that. Your question on, I'm sorry, your second one?
Talking about your public land dedication.
Public land dedication. Bonnie, are those the exact same numbers? What's the process that we went through on the PDP?
Yes, they are the exact same numbers that we had in the PDP, both for the public land dedication and the new corridors. This is literally the map from our PDP presentation. The one thing that you don't see is there's another 67 acres of publicly accessible private parks that are part of the individual neighborhoods. Those will come with each neighborhood development. But the public land dedication and the new corridors are exactly what was in the PDP.
Completely fair, your observation. There's not as much green because we're not showing all that private open space because that goes per neighborhood. The exact same requirements we are meeting. Third, sorry, John, hold on 1 second. Third comment was?
Traffic, there's a...
Yes. The angled cut right now, Shaw Boulevard, when does that get closed down?
I think the city's working on looking at shutting it down here pretty quickly. It'll have to be shut down by the time we start grading operations in September.
All right, John, I'll come to you in just a second. There was a gentleman in the back, or ma'am, you had a question. Yes, go right ahead. Sure. Yes. It's okay, right there. All right. Yes.
The road improvements, so yeah, I think your question, just to rephrase it to make sure I heard it correctly, is how do we work with the school districts on keeping that access open? So
And safe.
Yeah. So the sidewalk on the western side does not get closed. That stays in place. And really the pavement that's out there stays in place as well. We're doing most of the widening on our side of the roadway. And we do reach out to those major players like the school districts when we start construction and we work with the city if we ever did shut down a roadway, that it is acceptable to the city and it's acceptable to the neighborhood and the school district as well. And we make sure that there's an alternative route, which could be federal in that situation. If we had to shut it down, which again, the roadway is really 2 lanes right now, and we're doing widening on our side. So that additional widening should take care of keeping traffic lanes open.
Yes, the gentleman right beside John, and then we'll come back to John. Go ahead. Yes. Okay. Can you say that a little louder? Can we show the improvements on what Shaw? Great. So if anybody didn't hear, just on Shaw Boulevard specifically, thank you for answering the question, or asking the question. Todd, what did the downstream storm drainage improvements look like?
Yeah, so first off, what I would tell you is existing conditions today is you get unimpeded flow coming off the field that really focuses itself on Shaw, runs down Shaw to Circle, and back out through the neighborhoods that way. What we do is we put in, and this is one of our initial grading elements and infrastructure improvements that we are putting in, is we put in a detention and water quality facility right here, and that will knock down that existing flow for one, and put it into a holding basin, and then slowly release it. And what we'll be doing is putting in a storm system that goes down Shaw to connect into the Circle improvements that are there right now. And the floodplain that's out there, we're actually working on what's called a CLOMAR, or Certified Letter of Map Revision. And what that'll do is it should pull that floodplain in from getting into the yards. It won't fully take care of everything because there's still off-site flow coming down Lowell from other directions offside of our property. But what it's going to do is still reduce down that width of flow that does come down Shaw and control that in a better situation.
So very fair. Just to follow up, Todd, do you have to close the entire street? Is that on one side, north or south side, or is that an iterative process?
Yeah, that one, actually, we're putting a storm system in. We believe it's going to be on the north side of that roadway that's there. And we're coordinating utility crossings right now. There will be closure for a portion of that as we do construction, but I anticipate that that closure is probably closing down, sections of the roadway as they progress from the bottom or the lower part of Shaw at Circle up to the project. That's typically how we put our systems in. And so they may put in, 100, 200, 300 feet of pipe on a daily basis. They're usually protecting those trenches. They'll be working with the neighbors if they are, interfacing with driveways or access points in those situations.
Yep.
It's probably in the late September into October timeframe where that one would start, because we're not only finalizing our documents with the city, but we are going through a FEMA process, which is federal, and we anticipate that, in that timeframe.
Great. Karen?
Yeah, as to the floodplain, you're
Yes.
adjusting the floodplain lines or something, because the reality is you're not supposed to do construction in floodplains. And I don't know if you're doing all sorts of grading and structural stuff to make sure that you can build the hell out of the floodplain, but you're not supposed to be constructing in floodplains.
Yeah, the current floodplain that's out there today is actually in the street, and it goes into the homes that are there today. So what we're doing with our improvements is actually improving that situation.
No, but
And on our site, we have a very limited portion of the floodplain that runs up next to this pond, and the pond will actually be within that floodplain area. But that floodplain will be taken off of our site because of the control facility of the detention and water quality pond that's being put in to control that drainage.
Todd, if you're to do something in the floodplain, it's actually a very good question, Karen. What's the process you have to go through to be able to do construction?
So we're running through the FEMA process that I just mentioned with the Federal Emergency Management Association. We are also coordinating with the city on that, and we're coordinating with Mile High Flood District, who looks at drainage from an overall perspective, regional perspective. And then secondly, what we do when we grade within floodplains, a technicality, is we have to get a floodplain permit from the jurisdiction, which is Westminster, which is what we're processing right now.
Great. So just want to be clear, we're not building on top of that. That is off-site to us. I think the people on both north and south side here, this is one of those, it's not hard to question. This is a significant improvement of the conditions that happen there today. We're actually adding storm drainage pipes and drainage to this street that does not have those today. Somebody else, yes, right over here on the left. Yeah, please. Sorry, I'll come over here in a second. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So I think fair to say, and I think, ma'am, you're asking the same about Shaw here. What do you do in front of these houses, right, when you do that construction? Pardon? Yeah. So talking specifically about that, right, Todd, is on our side. That's where the pond is here. This is the pipe and the drainage system that goes in, and that's below grade. So again, we do that a segment at a time, so a few homes at a time. So there's no ponding or structures that are built except below grade. On our side, that is correct. Todd, maybe address what that looks like over here. Yeah, sure. You're asking about mosquitoes, is that what I heard? Yes. I understand. Yeah, go right ahead and address that, Todd.
So the question is mosquitoes? Is that what you're asking?
And is it a pond that holds water?
Yes. So is it a pond that permanently holds water all the time? No, it's not. We have state regulations that require us to release water over a certain period of time. Typically that's out between 48 and 72 hours. So that water's getting out, and so it's not creating a breeding ground for mosquitoes. And so that's a state regulation that we need to hit, and that is what how we designed our facility to meet those regulations. And that pond, again, is on our site, okay? And it is has an outlet structure, control structure to release that water out in a controlled manner, so it's not just flooding down the street like it does today.
Great. John, and then we're going to come over here. Go ahead.
Couple questions.
Sure.
Again, we go back to the view property, you haven't talked about the floodplain down there, like 84th and Circle, that's going to be addressed. Secondly, what guarantees are you going to make the people in these areas where you're doing construction, boulevard, mall, et cetera, as far as hours of operation, the amount of noise, the mess that this construction project brings to the neighborhood?
Yeah.
Mud and debris on the street, how will that all be addressed?
Yep.
And more importantly, the hours that will be permitted to do what?
It's a great question, completely fair. Todd, maybe address that. Start with the hours of operation, the process we go through the city, and then we'll come down here with this question. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Has any of this been approved by the city?
You bet. We'll go right through that. That's
I
great.
haven't seen it in city council or planning.
Great. Go ahead, Todd.
Let me start with your last one first. So we are working through construction documents. So some of your questions that you're asking for on B are actually related to an official development plan that's being processed. And that is more on the planning side, and it has preliminary engineering that's associated with it. The reason that one is not starting construction yet is it hasn't passed that point of planning commission or city council review. And then after that process, we go into detailed construction documents. Okay, so that's why you're not seeing it. That's why we're not starting construction yet on that one. That one's probably another 6-9 months away before we can start construction in there.
Again, that's B1 right here. This neighborhood, this is Bradburn. This neighborhood right here is what we're talking
But you
about.
got to get approvals on.
Just a second. Let us answer your question. We have answers, John. We're not. Let us go through the answers.
So we have a PDP, we have a master ODP on A, and as part of that, we go through construction documents and that approval, which is an administrative approval, it is not a planning commission or a city council approval. So all those documents go in, and you're all privy to take a look at those documents if you like. You can easily ask the city for those documents. We submitted those documents, I want to say we started this process probably about 9 months ago and have been going through reviews. We're currently finishing up some of our underground analysis to make sure that we don't run into those, any improvements that are out there, existing lines that are out there today, like telecommunication or gas and those types of things. That's a last piece that we really need to do to finalize construction documents. And so that's the last piece really in the puzzle before we go out and we start construction.
We're talking about doing construction in September,
Right.
and you haven't even done the construction drawings.
We have started and we have submitted construction drawings. That's what we've been doing for the last 9 months. We actually are working towards a grading permit right now, which that's the first phase of our construction, and that's the first element of construction that we start with.
So you're piecing
Yeah.
it together
No,
after the
no,
fact.
no, let me just be really clear. We are following the city process exactly as it follows for anybody else. To overly simplify, these improvements that we are talking about tonight are either off-site or in the public right-of-way, right? That will become public right-of-way, streets, roads, sidewalks, things that are in there. Generally, inside our neighborhoods, that goes through the neighborhood planning process where we talk about each parcel. This is how cities develop. It is completely consistent. And Todd is right. The master plan for these utilities has already been approved. These were approved. These images are all from our presentations to City Council and Planning Commission exactly on these improvements. Now we are doing the CDs and making those improvements. Exactly the process we went through. Yes?
Yeah, just a couple comments.
Sure, then I'll come here.
Flood plan. I have looked at some of the FEMA documents.
Great.
And it's pretty obvious that the FEMA survey, when it does extend into the Uplands property, was incomplete. They note that on the FEMA documents themselves. Is there intention to complete the floodplain survey so you know to what extent the floodplain actually is on what was formerly agricultural
Sure.
land, not required to have a floodplain analysis? You are making this residential, you are putting about 80% of it into impervious surfaces, which deters the actual natural absorption of water.
Right.
You do have a detention pond, which we do know, and you received comments about being undersized and so forth. We know that that's under review. FEMA, Mile High has not signed off on these things yet, but.
You are correct, and we said that as well, yes.
Right? So your intention, what you're trying to tell people
Yeah.
here is you're starting in September in an unapproved plan
Sure.
that federal agencies have not signed off yet,
Sure.
that the urban corridor, Mile High Flood District has not signed off on, but you're trying to sell us the idea that this is an improvement, yet the surveys are incomplete.
I thank you very much. Actually, you said it much better than we did, and you actually brought a really point of edification to this process. The reason these studies are being updated, completed, and finished, and we cannot commence until they're approved. So thank you for saying that. The reason they weren't required before is because it was agricultural land. We all know through the comp plan, through the planning process and zoning process, that is not the zoning designation. So that is why we are adding and able to actually change the floodplain. Not have it be over your yards today, be in the floodplain. We're actually taking it out of that. It's never had to be in compliance before. Your point is a very good one. It didn't have to comply before. It ran off the field into the neighborhood. We have to bring that into compliance. So the very thing you're pointing is that's the process we're going through. We cannot start until we have approval. What we thought, it was very important to share those dates, the anticipated approval and timeline, so everybody understood the process we were going through. You're absolutely right, we cannot start until we are approved, but this is the plan and what we're going through that approval process. I owe you one, sir. Oh, what's that, my friend?
Hours of operation.
Hours of operation, I apologize. Hours of operation.
Yeah, so hours of operation are set by the city. And your other question on what do you do about street, they get dirty, who tells us to clean that stuff up? That is all controlled by our city permit. And it's also controlled by our state permit. And so that will tell us, hey, if there's dirt on the road, we have to go clean it up, we have to sweep it. And we have to do it in this manner. If we have dust that's blowing around, we have to get a water truck out there, we have to do different things to control any elements that are outside of that normal operation, or if it's getting, again, dirt onto the roadways, we have to clean those things up. Those are all things that are controlled by the city. As far as timing goes, the city actually issues that permit and will establish the times. We haven't had that detailed discussion with him yet on that permit, because that's the one that's in review right now on the total hours of operation and the days that will be set.
Great, we have a question on this side, right here. Then I'll come over. I know I am right here.
I have another question on parcel B.
Sure.
There's a cul-de-sac
Yes.
and access for the place that is but not from that. Is there any hope that could be done soon?
Yeah. So I just want to, and Todd, you're going to have to answer that. So the question is, again, specific to parcel B1, and please help me. It shows here that we are going to have, and you're right, when we go to Planning Commission, we show a roadway access here from Bradburn into the site. You're asking if that's happening soon, or what was the second part of it? On the place. I'm sorry, the place. Got it.
So I think,
Yes.
yep,
Yes, I'm sorry.
yeah. As part of the Planning Commission meeting next week and the B1 application, you should see that on that application. Because what the city has directed us to do in working with the neighbors in that area is actually close this connection out to Bradburn and put a cul-de-sac in for those three properties that are down that street there, right? So that will be put in, and that will be put in with the B1 construction when we do get there. So we have started the planning process on that, and as soon as that construction starts on that part of it, we would start that construction as well.
So there's no hope of
Like this, how it could happen. That's a great question. So the question is really, can we do it as the general schedule? If this gets approved, Bonnie, what's anticipated time?
B1 and those improvements you're talking about, so those go to Planning Commission on Tuesday, and then City Council is in September. From there, we submit the civil CDs. John mentioned that's about a 6-month process. So once we get through that civil CD process, then we can begin those the place improvements.
So go ahead, please follow. Yep.
Is there any way we can have some traffic
Here.
control on a place called?
Okay.
Because every
Yeah.
inspection of truck,
Cuts that.
and other stuff is going to become movable.
Okay. So that's a great question. Just for everybody to repeat, is there a way we can have some traffic control on the place, right? And 82nd there during construction. We will, here's what I can say. The city's not, since it's not a city meeting, let us ask that question and kind of go through that. It makes perfect sense what you're asking. Yeah, great. Yeah, and by the way, I know we have at least one of those 3 property owners. We worked very closely with them to design that. It's really what we all thought was most effective there on that solution.
I'm one
Yes,
of
sir.
the 3 parties.
Yes, sir.
In that site.
Yes.
You're closing off that. How are the fire trucks going to get into that property if we have a problem?
You bet, yeah. So other side of that, so when we close that off, how on again this 82nd in the place, right? So folks, what we're talking about, how do you get in there? Yeah,
80th Avenue.
yeah.
You're just talking about how fire trucks will get to those three.
I live on 80th.
Yes.
When you close off that street, how is my fire truck going to get in there? They're going to plow the snow right up into my 80th Street entrance.
Okay.
And I won't be able to get out. If you got a problem to solve that,
You bet, go ahead, yeah.
Well, as far as the fire access, fire has looked at this and approved this cul-de-sac. It's been designed to actually take the largest fire truck that Westminster has. And as far as plowing goes, that would be whatever the city's process is on plowing. So if they plow whenever you get, I don't know what your regulation is here, 4 or 6 inches or something like that,
that's 6 inches.
that's when they would plow. But that roadway is designed, one, to do the fire trucks, and you should have enough storage there for fire as well, because it should be wide enough for that.
And sir, I think Todd should frankly shovel your snow, so I'll give him your cell
I'm
phone.
not going to be there.
Yeah.
I'm in Arizona, but
Yeah.
there's the question. Are you going
Yes.
to pave my road like you guys promised?
It's a pave your road, right? Is that, you said that?
80th Avenue.
Yeah, got it, yes.
Yes.
We have to go through that, yes, we do have to pave that, yes, sir.
Okay.
Yep, great, back over here, is that good? Okay, good, yeah.
Yes, I'm curious. I live in Shaw Heights.
Yes, sir.
I've noticed lately that our water pressure is getting lower than it used to be anyway.
Sure.
How is all of this going to affect the water pressure
Yeah.
in all this?
Can you go back to that overall slide, Jasper, in the beginning, the dashboard that shows the water lines? And then Todd, go ahead and maybe from here. Or the offsite.
Maybe the offset. The offset can give us.
There you go.
Yeah, this one shows it. So what the city did first, before we even did anything, is they analyzed this area and determined what deficiencies were in the area without us doing anything, without us doing any improvements to the area. And so they identified a couple areas that were a problem. And one of the elements was, hey, we need to bring a larger line from the tank that's up here at 97 and bring that down and bring it to the tanks down here to create a stronger network in the area. And then additionally, for the Shaw area, what they said is we don't only just need an 8-inch line here, we need a 12-inch line through here to help areas of deficiency down in this area. So our project with these improvements will actually help strengthen the network. And I can't answer directly to what your water pressure is today or what it could be in the future, but I presume that it should be better with the strengthening of the overall network within this area.
The question was, what about the coyotes in the area? So other wildlife, the process as we go through that. Sorry, yeah. So we went through a wildlife analysis. That's part of the, I think, Lonnie, go through the assessments that were done during the process and how that works. So, sorry, I don't know if that's a question to you. Todd, maybe? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've done our environmental assessments that we're not impacting any threatened and endangered species that are in the area. We're not impacting any migrating birds. We've also looked at the wetlands, and there are no wetlands on the property. And so from that perspective, we have taken care of any of the requirements that were there for the threatened and endangered species. As far as any other wildlife that is on site, that will migrate off to other areas as construction does start.
Yes, in the back row. Yeah, and then I'll come over here. Yes, please.
Yeah, we're at 88 Federal.
Okay.
We're the Fraternal Order of Eagles. We have an actually out in front of our building at least once a week.
Yes.
We get hit 2 times this year where they came into the building. I think adding all these multi-family homes is going to even add more to the congestion and even there. It's already enough rest.
Sure. So,
That's
Jasper,
mine.
yeah, and I listen. I'll always respect that you operate a business right there on that opposite
Yeah,
corner there.
stop right in front of our place as well.
Yes, absolutely. Jasper, if you can go to a larger blow up of the street network, if you look maybe at Federal.
88 Federal.
Yeah, so I know right here is where your site is here.
Right.
The one thing I would just say, and we can show the improvements on Federal. I mean, I think one of the things we've really struggled with is the existing conditions of Federal today. And I understand that that's on our side, but showing these additional lanes that we're adding and the safety, the ease of crossing. I will tell you, and your point was more about the multifamily, but this is what we're doing, the improvements on Federal. We had to work with CDOT, that's a state highway, Federal is, as I'm sure you know. So we went through that process with them as well. The one thing I would say, one of the real challenges of that roadway, and you're on the other side at the end of that, is that it's so open today. And I say this, I've said it during our approval hearings, the most important thing we believe we're actually bringing is actually to have some building front and density at the street, that naturally actually slows down traffic. Today you go flying down there, you go flying right here because there's nothing there. It is an open area. And so we actually think a lot of that speed culminates right at your intersection, frankly. And so we actually, I appreciate your point, multifamily, we are adding traffic trips, but we believe that actually attenuates and slows down the traffic and creates a safer pattern to that. So that's how we go through that engineering process.
There's a shuttle lock into our building, and it's a
Yeah.
big rock. And it's like,
I know, I can only imagine the things. Yeah.
There we go again.
Yeah, And I hope we really can show, and that proves out to be a much softer edge that's there than that today, or what happens there. Yeah, sure. This gentleman and then over here, okay? Yes.
In regards to floodplain consideration,
Sure.
once the uplands development is completed, a large portion of the land that is currently natural.
Yes.
Turned into cement and concrete and
Yeah.
asphalt. Has there been consideration put forth on the part of the developer in regards to modifying the depth and dredging out the Allen ditch, which is where the water will go naturally, in order to accommodate the 100 or 500-year flood event? Is there any consideration to made in regards to that?
Are you talking, sir, about past circle?
Yeah.
Down in that area? Yep.
Improvement will dovetail with the Allen ditch, which is where it generates. But are there any considerations to reestablishing the ditch or reducing the depth of the ditch? Because that's where the water will go.
Where it goes. Yep.
And which is designated as wetland.
That is designated as wetlands. You are absolutely correct. Yes.
So again, as we mentioned, we will be reducing the amount of flow that gets down to Shaw and Circle, okay? Our improvements and working with the city go from our development down Shaw to Circle and make the connection with those existing improvements. The city and Mile High Flood District are actually looking at a broader study that goes from 36 all the way back up to that same connection point for us. So that's a broader study that's actually being done right now and being looked at. So this project does not actually go past Circle Shaw, but I know that the city, again, in Mile High is looking at downstream conditions and what could occur. There are improvements that may be made in the future to that area to help any situations like that.
I have an additional question regarding, have there been any building code modifications on the part of the city of Westminster in order to require the developer to modify the exterior building materials so that it prevents fire from occurring, such as what occurred in the Bluesville Superior area during our catastrophic fire event?
Well, that's a good one for our architect.
Yeah, so folks, if you didn't hear, just are there any, as we go through the building permit phase, are there been changes by the city, right, for our buildings to improve fire safety since the terrible tragedy and fire we had? Paul, this is our architect. I'm going to let him answer that if that's okay.
So first, Westminster's adopted 2021 codes. So they're going off the newest building codes. Two, they do fire sprinklers in all homes. So they'll all have the water fire sprinklers there to help with fire. 3 years ago, deviations from what's being requested was following all codes for all projects as far as fire.
That, just so you know, Westminster is one of the very few cities that requires sprinklers in residential. They've adopted the 21 code, and we will build to that code as well. Yes, Karen? And then, yeah.
Really, it should be brick or masonry construction. The whole idea was, when this zoning change happened, it said it was similar in character to the rest of the area, and that's really part of the truth. But one of the main things that the homes around this area have is brick construction, and that's not planned at all. And that's one of the best ways to mitigate fire. But I don't know that there's pretty infrastructure thought about involved in this plan. It doesn't look like it.
Well, so folks, I want to be, and thank you for your comment about brick. Again, the inclusion of residential sprinklers is certainly the most important thing that we can do on fire prevention. That's added. Even our fine island brick home, you know, that doesn't have that. So the inclusion of that, good for Westminster for adopting that. We're adding that in. Your second question about are we doing any sustainability, the landscaping kind of green practices? What I want to be sure and show, and the challenge of tonight, is just that again. And you can just use one of the streets, that's fine. Is that, again, we are showing the public improvements, right? The public additions that are happening. So that's right away. A lot of those sustainability practices, the landscaping, the fabric, the plant, that is all happening on our site with each individual neighborhood that gets submitted. So Karen, there were so many countless examples of that. Bonnie can probably talk about the certifications we have, but we're going through that process. But you'll see that in each sub-neighborhood. But this does give an example of the transition, the native plant palette that we're using, sustainable practices that we're adding on every single
Well,
page.
infrastructure itself, using, as the person mentioned,
Yes.
a lot of asphalt and concrete versus drainage swales, that is not sustainable infrastructure. What you're showing is a bunch of sidewalks, a bunch of widening of streets. Those are not sustainable. Those are all recipes for more flooding, more non, where you cannot penetrate asphalt and concrete. And that's going to be more flooding potential in that area rather than less.
That is
And
not a true statement. I want to be very clear about that. That is not a true statement. This is the very process that we go through, as was stated earlier. Because of the land type that it is today, it has not gone through any of those analyses, and all the water runs off like a sheet. It does not have to be detained on site. It does not have to be controlled. There is not piped infrastructure for that. We are actually adding all of that, and that's the standard you go through. Hold on a second. I understand.
I live across the street.
Yes, sir.
Run off like a river.
Folks, here's what we're going through the approval process, and that's the process you go through on these improvements. Todd, I don't know if there's anything else to add, just kind of the way it happens, the infrastructure.
Yeah, we're following city standards.
And that the city standards are not very sustainable. And we're adding a lot of impervious cover, or supposedly adding a lot of.
Sir, we can't hear actually. Can we all still that? Yes, so thank you again, Westminster, good for you, 2021 code, one of the few cities in the metro area that has fire prevention, sprinklers. They're very advanced from a sustainability standpoint. This cert right here with the head on. Yes. Yeah, the question, if you didn't hear, this movement intersection, this stoplight here, has this been approved, or what's the process to get it approved on that?
That's part of the
Just one sec, sorry, then I'll come to you. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. That is part of the construction documents for federal, so all the signal improvements are within that package. So as soon as that construction document package is approved, that signal will be built along with our construction.
Yes, sir. In the back.
I just want to say to you guys, working as a team, thank you for giving us something that we can actually do.
Great, thank you very much. Yeah.
How about that?
Oh, this is a good question. I actually, the question here, thank you, sir. You can have more time if you want. That's it. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. The question, you actually asked it earlier. I did not catch it. When are we going to mow B1? Folks, we've got a request, B1, B2, to be sure we mow that. I think you've all seen we've had a pretty remarkable rain, and we'll get it, and we just got the thumbs up. We'll get that done right away, okay? Our apologies. Yes, John, and then I'll come to you guys. Sorry.
That picture's fine. You're clear you're going to start working on the west side.
Yes, sir.
Let's talk about the whole project. The environmental awareness studies. Have they been done? If so, are those available? When will they be available? Secondly, the property closest to 88 Mall that has groundwater contamination, carcinogen, methyl-ketone, that's right there across from the school. How is that going to affect the children once you start moving that dirt around?
Great.
How will that affect the school children long term?
Great. Todd.
So we have done environmental studies that include groundwater review. They also include any contamination that has occurred in the area. Those have been identified in that upper area, as you mentioned, at 88th and Lowell. We are not grading that area. That is a future park site that is going to be put in place, and so we will not be getting to a point where we get into where those chemicals actually are in that area, and so we won't be exposing those to the air. There is nothing else in the site. That area we're not touching right now. 88 and February, we're only touching the.
Are you confirming that there's been gas station?
I'd have to go back and look at that report.
I think we should know that time.
Yeah.
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 I understand this when I go down.
Yeah.
Full test, going through the testing process, absolutely. John, the regulators do the requirements of what needs to be improved. We are doing all those improvements. I said her, so you go first and then you in the back row. Yes. Yes, please.
On 88, I know you're not working right now.
Yes.
When you do,
Yes.
that's our only entrance and exit is
Yes.
88, period.
88.
88, that's
Yes.
the only way in and out
Yep.
of our business.
Yep.
We have large hall rentals.
Okay.
That kind of thing. I've seen a lot of equipment being dropped up and set there, and it's like construction equipment and everything else. So
Okay.
I don't know whether it's you guys or who it is, but it's inconsiderate for them to not talk to us and tell us, hey, we're gonna park our equipment there, or can we?
Great. Okay. So your first question, we know your location here in the northeast corner, 88 Todd again. Improvements primarily on our side, right? The south side, or on Federal being the west side. I know you know that. We'll work very hard to not limit flow, right? The traffic flow, there's probably short term, but earth movers, is there equipment there today, Todd, or is that's not our equipment, but we'll be sure that we notify you and also come there for lunch, yes.
Yeah, we own that backfield behind us as well.
Yeah.
We mowed it, so.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, 88, we need to have access to our business all the
Perfect.
time.
Okay. Let's go through that process.
Unless you guys want to pay us.
Yep, no, I don't. We'd rather just collaborate. So I want to show you something, and I apologize. Sir, you in the back. And oh my gosh, I have made a terrible mistake. You have had your hand up for a half hour. I'm sorry. Go right ahead. Will you go to where this is on the website?
What
Last
exits do you have in your development to 88? Do you know which?
Yeah, sorry. So can I just ask your question again? What roadway connections will we have south of 88 that connect through 88? Is that correct?
Yeah, because I live on Ken Street.
Okay.
It's already a raceway because it's a straight shot to 97.
Yes.
And I'm wondering what exits you have onto 88 from your development.
Great. Jasper, we're going to answer your question. You waited a long time to ask that. I have been remiss in not showing this. This is uplandscolorado.com. All of these plans and updated schedules, if you go here, there's a construction tab. And so that will have that on there. I just want, as people are tracking that, we go through the process. That's actually the process you go through of public information, but this is where you can find that. So uplands.colorado.com, and then there's a construction tab that has been added to do that. Now we'll show you 88, and Bonnie, if you can answer that question. Just 88, Jasper, just right there.
Yeah, so right now, we're showing Urban Street connecting to 88. The PDP, and if you find me after this meeting, I have the PDP in my bag and can show you where the potential access locations could be. We're just starting the plans for that neighborhood, so we haven't gone to a pre-app meeting with the city yet. So I can't recall exactly, but I can show you what the potential ones might be. I believe it's one on either side of Irving, but none of that's confirmed until we go through those neighborhood processes.
Right. So major trunk infrastructure, that's what we're showing. Then there will be additional connections inside that neighborhood submittal. That's what Bonnie will show you. So those are inside of that. This just shows Irving.
And I'm sure you're aware there are 4 schools down there.
Absolutely.
4 schools.
Yes.
And it's already, I mean, I travel down Lowell in the morning and sometimes late at night. It's a traffic jam down there. And I fear for those children every day.
Yep. Yep. I understand, again,
Imagine all this
Yeah.
construction and traffic on Lowell and 88.
Great. I understand entirely. I'll come back to that point, ma'am, right behind you. Or, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I left you. Yes, it is. And if you signed up tonight, we also, as I said, we recorded this and we'll link that so you can listen or watch it again. Okay. Sorry for not calling on you. Thank you very much. You bet. Yes, right here and then John. Yeah. Sorry, I did not hear that. Are we going to need to raise the grade of the site? Is that the question? Okay, so what's the grading, Todd, that we do across the site?
In general, we're probably, filling in lower places down by the detention pond to build that embankment. So Here we have some very steep areas coming into the site. Those will probably be cut down to some extent. So we're probably changing the topography anywhere between 5 and 10 feet in certain areas. Higher or lower. It's going to vary across the site.
Particularly where those slopes are. Yes, John?
Back to the anything wall, and you say, well, we're not going to straight through the well, if you're going to dig up the ground, put this pipe in, that's going to expose the leachate products, the cancer causing agents right in front of the school. Secondly, you're talking about demolishing the buildings that are currently on the site.
Yes.
What precautions will be taken as far as the asbestos in all of the products on all of those buildings? Because we already know another project you're involved with, and we've been suffering with the asbestos, lead, and lead-based paint just hanging out in the neighborhood since November. Is that what we're faced with here too?
I honestly have no idea what you're talking about or referring to, but I'll be happy to answer your questions. Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
I actually do not, but I'm happy to answer your question here. So we will go through full regulatory process on demolition. I think, folks, one thing I know that we can say this, the cities and the state, FEMA, there's federal oversight on this site as well, are incredibly good at regulating this process. We started this over 3 years ago plus and gone through that. So John, there are specific requirements that you go through on every structure when you go through a demolition. That is actually part of your demolition permit. We will follow that through its process. As far as moving and the chemical analysis that you go through, you're also required to go through a site analysis. We have completed that site analysis. The regulators put a plan in place for how you do construction and removal of that area, and we will follow that process. If there's any additional issues, they then provide a revised regulatory plan and you go through that process. We are following the process to the T, and we will continue to do so. Yes?
There's a project there, a Norris Design project, over on 64 and Bedlow.
Okay.
That has been sitting there, half graded, the idea being, I think, similar to this, you're gonna grade it first and then figure out the construction drawings afterwards. That site's been sitting there, graded, with hills and weeds growing on it. Somebody told me it doesn't have enough water to continue that plan. I mean, this is how Morris Design and some of these developers operate, is they do the grading first, screw over the site, and then see whether they actually can get the stuff through on the construction.
So I don't know anything about that site. I don't know. I'm sorry for the background on that, but that's what that is. I don't know. Is that even a Westminster site? I'm not sure. But it's not Westminster. Okay. Yeah. So.
I'm sorry. I'm part of a 200-person firm. I'm not familiar with that specific project. I'm certainly happy to ask my partners about it, but I can't.
And I will be, and also, and we can go, listen, folks, I know a lot of people want to go through, I know we have folks that we've had a lot of questions back and forth with for years. I will say, just so everybody understands, grading always occurs before construction occurs.
Yes,
that is how development occurs.
But not before construction drawings.
It actually,
There are construction
we have
drawings
construction drawings.
that are being reviewed and will be approved before we go to construction.
Everybody
That is part of
understand
the
we cannot
process.
start construction
That is
before
what
they're
we're working
approved,
through
okay?
right now.
I just want to be very clear about that. These theoretical things are not happening. We will not commence until we have approvals to do so. A few more questions. Any new folks? Yes, please. And then you two over here. Did you have one? Okay. No problem. Yeah, sure. So that question or that map that showed the different neighborhoods, there are different builders within each one of those that we're going through. And those respective builders in these neighborhoods will go through that approval process, right? So Bonnie, maybe an example, we're going through for B1 right now.
So the ones that are in process, so B1 at the bottom lower left, that one is the Green Finders, they're a home builder. So that is single family and duplexes.
Sorry. And then maybe just a couple other examples.
So the upper right corner, so C2 C2, that's St. Charles Town Company, they're an affordable housing developer. C1A, that's Maker Housing, they're part of the Adams County Housing Authority, so that's affordable homes as well. The C1D, that's just north of where we're sitting here, so that's an expansion of Crown Point, so expanding this school.
And then when we go through that, each one of these neighborhoods will have the builder involved in that submittal for approval. Yes, sir, and then I'll come over here. Yeah.
For rent.
C2 for rents. Yes, sorry, thank you.
What regulations do you follow for environmental assessments and how do you access them?
Yes, environmental assessments. Todd, what was the process for that and how do you access it?
So those are federal regulations. We have reports that we have multiple reports that were done for the site. What's that?
Was it a NEPA process?
Not necessarily. NEPA's more for federal funding. What's that? Yeah, but we're not federally funding. That part of that's when NEPA usually kicks in. This is more of a federal regulations for doing environmental reports, threatened and endangered species, wetlands. All those follow federal regulations. So I don't know exactly what the code number is, but those all follow. Those are done by third-party consultants that we have, and we can happily get you copies of all those reports if you want.
Can you make them accessible on the website? Can you make them accessible on your website?
Yeah, and they're also public record because the city has a copy of all these as well.
What may be easier, honestly, is to link where they're at on the city website because they're such large files. I bet if we can do that, we can certainly provide them direct links. Yes. Somebody else over here. Yeah.
Yeah, are there any near or far future scenarios where the developer at the city of Westminster might reach a disagreement and either delay or or anything on the horizon that could potentially destroy increasing interest rates or something like international?
Yeah.
And if that were to occur, is the city of Westminster liable or the developer liable?
Yeah, it's a very fair question, particularly in the light of the last 5 years, right? The pandemic could never suggested that was going to happen. So maybe just the way we're going through this, again, focus on the infrastructure up front, putting that infrastructure in, and then each one, so I'm going to answer that two ways. Each one of the neighborhoods have to go through an approval process, right, sir? So we continue to go through that, Planning Commission and City Council, so they have to approve each one of those. This is, again, just the infrastructure. So could a neighborhood, if the worst case scenario happens, this isn't started process yet, could that be slowed down? Sure, that could happen, right? But we still have to go through the continued approval process, regulatory process with the city. Again, the infrastructure, that's an administrative process. Most of what we've shown tonight is administrative, and we're going through that process now.
I can help add to your question, though. I think what you're getting is what kind of financial security is out there to finish improvements, maybe if we start and all of a sudden something changes. As part of our agreement with the city, we have to put in place, they have what's called a public improvement agreement. So we actually have to post money or post security that if we start this and we decide, hey, we're going to walk away, there's money there that they can finish those improvements. Okay, so that's all part of the process. That's a part of this approval process that's tied to the construction documents that we have. So we can't get that approval without that other element being in place as well.
That was a much better answer than I gave. I should have just let you answer. I apologize. Yeah. Any other questions, folks? It is. No, there are some affordable, as everybody remembers, we're very focused on the missing middle, affordable housing and different types of housing across this site to bring attainable housing to this neighborhood. So this is an affordable housing, as is this. This is a market rate proposal, so it'll be a full mix across the site. What's that? That's right. I don't think I said that at all, no. Back there. Just, I don't know the price of eggs. You are right about that, Joe. There's no doubt. Yes, sir. Yeah, like inlets, what will that, is that what you're asking? Yeah. You live on the north side, sir, or south side of school? Okay, so what will be, are there grates there? What will happen on that north side?
I'd have to probably look exactly where you are, because there are certain locations where we're adding storm drainage inlets up at the intersection of Shaw and Lowell. And then as it goes further down the street, there may be one other intersection there that we're adding some inlets in. But I think most of it actually goes down to the end of Circle and Shaw. Oh, no, it's street can handle a little more than that.
Folks, I think we're at, I don't know, 7:30, I'm guessing. I should get a watch, 7:30-ish. Yes, very good guess. So we're an hour and a half in. I'm going to take 3 or 4 more questions, and then we're happy to stay and take individual questions if you would like. But I just want to be respectful of everybody's time. Anybody have concluding questions at all? Maybe I took all the questions. Okay, so folks, again, Jasper, if you can go to the website, I want this, again, for you to know on construction questions, timelines, all of that, again, as well. If you signed up, we'll send you that link back so you know where to do that, and the recording of this meeting so you can go through. So again, that says construction there. That's the tab you go to. So a few folks had specific questions. Feel free to follow up with us so we can be sure and share those documents with you. Thank you all very much. Thanks for being patient and coming out tonight. I actually do not.